Champions Cup semi-finals are done. Now, both the red-hot favourites got through. However, it was far from plain sailing for either of those sides. So why don't we start with Sunday's game? So that was Quins visiting Toulouse. So it was a nice sunny day down in the south of France. Great for running rugby. And that's exactly what we got. As the smoke cleared from the fireworks, Toulouse got off to a crackerjack start, took a 5-0 lead. Marcus Smith came bursting back through for Quins with some nice work. All of a sudden, Quins are 7-5 up, and maybe the dream is on. A little bit of tit for tat after that, and it ended up being about 12-12 after about 20-25 minutes. But then all of a sudden, Toulouse cut loose. I mean, they had the likes of Dupont, Malvaca, Costas just shredding things in midfield, running beautiful lines, breaking tackles, making yards. And the offloading was sublime. I mean, offloads were coming left, right, and centre, both from the backs and the forwards. And 3 quick tries in 10 minutes, I think, saw Toulouse with a 31-12 lead. And to be honest with you, at that point, it looked like this was going to be all too much for Quins, and it was because Toulouse were just going to be too hot for them. However, things started to take a little momentum shift. Because as we've learned over the last, say, 5 or 10 years, you can never write Quins off. When they proved it time and time again, they even proved it in the quarterfinals of the Champions Cup this year. And they just started to get a bit of a foothold in the game, and they started to come back and make things happen and put Toulouse under a little bit of pressure. And maybe Toulouse took their foot off the gas a little bit as well, but all of a sudden, you've got Murley's gone over, Tyrone Green's gone over, 2 quick tries from Quins, and you're looking at, I think it was a 5-point game at that point, and it was really difficult to determine which way it was going to go. I mean, the fight at the breakdown was ferocious from both sides. There were some wonderful turnovers, and it really was really, really hard to call. Then there was the momentum shift. Jack Walker decided to clear out a ruck using his shoulder against Dupont's head. He was sin-binned. Now, in my eyes, I thought it was a straight red. But, you know, I think the officials studied it for a little while. They talked it through. They came up with a yellow. Maybe Quins got away with one there. But equally, earlier in the game, I think it was Intermac, went shoulder to head against, and I think it was Esterhazen, and they got away with one. You know, there was not many replays of that one in the stadium. And yeah, so maybe that balanced out. But that little momentum shift there of the 15 versus 14 just got Toulouse back in the game. And they scored another try. So that was 6 tries on the day. They stretched their lead to 12 points. But Quins kept piling on the pressure. You know, they didn't give up. They might have been down to 14 men, but they still were throwing the ball around beautifully and really going with a massive attacking intent. But it all fizzled out at the point where Joe Marler decided to slap Ramos around the back of the head. Quins had just won a penalty, which they could have kicked to the corner, but instead that penalty was reversed. Now, at the time, Ramos looked furious. He was absolutely livid about that. But I'm sure inside he was smiling because he knew that was game done. So I think, to be fair to Toulouse, worthy winners. They played some absolute beautiful rugby. I think they kind of had the dominance over Quins in the scrum as well. In open play, I think there were some defensive weaknesses there, but I think they were worthy winners. And unfortunately for Quins, their Champions Cup dream had come to an end, but they gave it a hell of a go, and credit to them for doing that. Now, I'd love to know what you think. You know, did you think Toulouse were worthy winners? Did you think another Quins comeback was on? Please do let me know in the comments. Love to know what you think. And whilst you're there, if you're happy to support the channel, if you're kind of enjoying this content, please do give me a like or a subscribe. It's greatly appreciated, and it just helps reach more rugby fans. So let's move on to Saturday's game. So we had the English Prem leaders, Northampton Saints, going to a fully packed out 82,000 crowd at Croke Park, an absolute sea of blue. Crowd was jumping at the start of this one. And I was ready to watch what I thought was going to be a magnificent clash between 2 absolutely brilliant sides. But instead, as that game started, Saints looked like deers in the headlights. They were completely overwhelmed They were second to everything. Leinster looked, a little bit like a machine, didn't make any mistakes, just kind of kept pounding on the pressure, hitting that defensive wall, making yards, and then through the brilliant rugby brain of Gibson Park, all of a sudden, they'd scored 2 tries through James Lowe. You know, one was a quick tap passed out wide to the corner. The other one was a lovely little sort of palm on as the ball flipped up off the back of a ruck, and it was 12-0 Leinster. And Leinster continued to dominate that game. They were sort of, great at the set piece. They were dominant in the breakdown. Saints were struggling. They were making lots of handling errors. They kept turning the ball over. Every time they had a little bit of pressure, maybe a line out, sort of 10, 15 meters out, they then lose that line out. Their scrum was going backwards, and it just looked like wall-to-wall Leinster. And it wasn't really until about the 35th minute that Saints produced anything. And they started to attack. They had a couple of attacking lineouts, and all of that ended up in a penalty kick, which then brought the game at halftime to 15-3. And to be fair, it probably should have been even a bigger score towards Leinster. They had a whole series of phases down in the Northampton 5 meter line after the clock was dead in the first half, and probably should have scored another try. So they kind of go into the sheds at halftime, and it's Leinster all the way. They look completely in control of that game. And not long after halftime, it's even more Leinster pressure going in. Baird made an absolutely beautiful break, cut through the field, and eventually that break worked its way to be another James Lowe try. So amazing for James Lowe, hat-trick in the semi-final. He didn't have to do that much for those 3 tries. I think probably the first one he had to break a couple of tackles, but in general, they were armchair tries, but he was there to score them. So fair play to him for that. And it should have been Leinster all the way from there. And then again, rugby's just a game of momentum, isn't it? There was a missed penalty from Byrne. So you kind of got that lack of pressure being converted in the back end of the first half. Missed penalty by Byrne, and it was a kickable penalty. And I think, to be fair, his kicking on the day, or his place kicking on the day, was a little bit indifferent. And that seemed to spark Northampton into life. All of a sudden they were starting to throw the ball around. They were starting to make some actual yardage and look like the team that's been cutting up the Premiership all season. And they kept applying pressure. They kept moving the ball around. And then eventually, I think after about 56 minutes or so, or maybe it was the hour mark, somewhere around there, Hendy managed to get over for Saints' first try. And it was a bit of a defensive mix-up following a chip and chase. Lama, I think it was Lama and Porter probably could have dealt with it. They didn't. Hendy popped it down. And, that gave Northampton a bit of rejuvenation. And they looked like they could be hungry to make something happen. And they kept the pressure on. They kept it on. And then eventually in about the 73rd, 74th minute, they put Seabrook over to make it a 3-point game. Now, I think, that was a little bit of a shell-shocking moment for Leinster, and maybe even more of a shell-shocking moment for the massive Leinster crowds that were there. And it felt like all of the momentum had gone Northampton's way. And this really could be on for what I would have considered a massive shock of Saints going there and winning. However, fair play to Leinster. They did not panic. They kept their composure. They kept Saints at arm's length. They kept them well away from the try line. They weren't conceding any silly penalties. And they kind of just really wore down that clock. They ran down that clock for the last 3 or 4 minutes. Eventually, I think it was either Conan or Doris who got a great turnover. And it was only then that the Leinster team and the Leinster supporters could breathe a sigh of relief that they'd actually won that game. And it was kind of utterly incredible, really, although not a great game from the point of view of 2 teams performing for 80 minutes, because Saints were nowhere for the first 50 or 60 minutes. But you could just see that had been a real battle. And people were very relieved from the Leinster point of view that they got through that one. And there wasn't a huge amount of celebration from the from the Leinster's players. I think they were pretty much relieved as well. And whilst congratulations for Leinster, another final, a 3rd final in a row. And, I don't think we should underestimate what a great achievement that is. I think neither side will be particularly pleased with their performance on the day. I mean, Saints really didn't turn up. They made lots of errors, lots of basic errors. and looked a little bit awestruck. And similarly, whilst Leinster looked great in the first 40, 50 minutes, they really let this one slip away from them, and it wasn't really apparent how that happened. And it had kind of shades of last year's final against La Rochelle, where they looked to be in control, and they lost control obviously a lot earlier in the game. So yeah, huge sigh of relief from Leinster, and very much congratulations to Leinster as well. Congratulations to Toulouse. Two great sides got through to the final. Probably at the beginning of the season, they were everybody's favourites to do that. And obviously commiserations to both Saints and Quins as well. They ran it pretty close in the end. They can both, I think, be very proud of their Champions Cup campaigns. Although I think certainly Saints on the day will be more disappointed than Quins. And here now we're left with certainly the final I was hoping for as a neutral. The two European giants. You kind of got Toulouse on 5 stars, Leinster on 4 stars, going to go toe to toe at Tottenham at the end of May. I cannot wait. I'm seriously excited for this game. Got my tickets. Can't wait to get there. But again, love to know what you think. Did you think Leinster were lucky to win? Did you think they deserved it? Were you disappointed that Saints didn't really turn up for most of that match? And please do let me know who you think is going to win what I think will be an absolute classic final. Get stuck into the comments. Please do like and subscribe. Thanks very much for watching. And look forward to seeing you on the next one.